the best things about the DevilMayCry franchise are the vast variety of bosses within each game, ranging from some of the best to some of the worst in the franchise. The first DevilMayCry, however, has all the bosses, at least in my opinion, to pretty decent to some of the best in the series. For this video, I'm going to be ranking every boss in the first game from the worst to the best. The way I'm going to rank each boss is pretty simple. I'm going to be ranking all the fights for each boss, the arena designs, the variety of moves they have for different strategies, and overall enjoyment. In terms of the enjoyment and just how the bosses feel, I'm going to strictly rate them on how it is on DMD. It just makes sense. I think it's the best reason for it, since DMD is the hardest mode, and it would be wrong to rate it on any lower difficulty, since every boss will be at their peak performance on Dante Must mode. One last thing is that only 0.3% of you guys are subscribed, so if you do like DevilMayCry content, please make sure to like, subscribe if you want to see more, as we are very close to hitting 1,000 subs, and again, you can always just change your mind later. With that being said, let's start the list.
The son of Sparda who challenges the darkness for this.
Block off, Featherface, or you can stick around and find out the hard way.
Starting off with the worst boss in this game, Griffin. Now remember, as I mentioned before, none of the bosses in this game by any means are bad, as in my opinion, all of them are at least decent, like I said. However, Griffin definitely has some flaws. One of the flaws I have for Griffin is that you barely get any use out of any of your double arms. Unless you knock him over to the ground, you can't really use him at all, since he's mainly in the air. The only times you can are using DT with Alistar, Meteor with Ifrit, and using Round Trip with Sparda or Alistar. Other than that, your best way to deal damage to him is just using guns, and they can get really repetitive and boring, especially when people just spamming grenade gun 24/7 and just spam rolling with it. Griffin's attacks are pretty simple. It's mainly ranged attacks with a lot of lasers, but they can come up pretty fast. It can be kind of hard to dodge if you're not timing it right. He can spawn platforms to be able to deal damage easier. And if you do enough damage to him, he'll actually be knocked, as I mentioned, which you can use your other weapons as well. In my opinion, his first fight is probably his best fight, or two, as it's mainly in a courtyard, which I think is awesome, but the camera doesn't really screw you over. And that's the biggest problem with this boss, the camera. Well, the first fight is fine. The second fight is where it really starts to get a little tedious. The second fight is on a ghost ship, which happens to be the ship of St. Elmo, and I think it's freaking awesome. However, Griffin has another attack where he throws an electric bird at you, and this attack is so dang annoying. For once, if it hits you, it completely throws you off of the platform, and it just throws you in any direction it wants to. And then when that happens, the camera just goes haywire, and it's almost impossible to get back up. And it gets really annoying as when the attacks hit you and you can't do anything to dodge it because the camera just F's you over so much. However, that fight can end pretty fast if you decide to go on the top of the ship and go for the critical hit, which you're seeing on screen right now, which is very easy. And then there's Griffin's third fight. Griffin's third fight is actually just straight up horrendous. I don't know what the devs were smoking when they decided to make this boss fight. Oh my gosh, is the camera for the first phase unbearable. The arena is pretty cool, and Griffin does have a couple more moves, as well as a critical when he opens his mouth, and if you do it at the right time, it's like double the damage. The best bet to use for this is definitely just use a grenade gun and Ifrit, honestly. And although you could use air raid, I feel like on DMD, just using the other combo is just way more efficient. But even then, it's so unbearable, because for the first fight, it is so hard to just not get hit, because the camera shifts, and it's impossible to react to anything. And it always happens in the worst time, when trying to go into the teleporters to go up top. However, after the second phase triggers, it's actually a decent fight in my opinion. I actually enjoy it, but just good luck trying not to get hit in the first phase. It's so annoying. Now, despite how much I've complained, there are some pretty big upsides to Griffin. In my opinion, the design of Griffin is absolutely amazing. It's probably my second favorite in this game. 2, all the arenas are pretty good in my opinion. I enjoy all of them. They look very stunning. And 3, Flock Off, the soundtrack for Griffin, is an absolute banger. It's on par with Ultraviolet. And although the biggest problem is definitely the camera, and it can kind of get repetitive, Griffin's still overall a fun fight. So despite being on the bottom of the list, even with some pros and some cons, Griffin is still a great boss overall.
Those eyes, same light as in Sparda's eyes.
Why my mother?
That useless being. If you need a mother, I can create it. As many as you want. Just like I created Trish.
Silence!
This is it. Starting number 4. The main antagonist of DMC1, Mundus. Now, before I talk about Mundus, what actually is this boss fight, man?
Ew! Dude! What the fuck?
A bullet hell, or shmup, for a hack and slash game. Now it kind of fits, and it is cool in some way, but this wasn't the same game I was playing a couple minutes ago. The problem I have with the first fight is that you literally have no defense at all. You literally only can shoot and DT. That's it. And this guy throws multiple moves at you at once. Remember when I mentioned that I'm going to restrict it basically on DMD? Well, this fight is so sadistic and can be damn near unfair at times. A lot of people argue, myself included, that this is one of the worst boss fights in the game. You literally have no defensive options at all, and you're at the mercy of inverted controls. There are a lot of options to be able to deal a lot of damage to Mundus though, like when he's about to curl up and go to the other side again when you're very close. If you hit the dragon or the DT at a certain time, it actually deals double damage, and if he goes up to you in a certain time and you time it right, if you spin move, it actually deals damage to him as well, which is pretty nice, but it's pretty risky. Mundus has a lot of moves, but they're so random, it feels like on DMD, which I'm not confirming if they are, but it feels like it. This a-hole will throw multiple moves at you at once, so good luck not trying to get hit. You can throw lightning strikes, meteors, 2 different types of lasers, tripwires, and rocks. Let's not to mention about the lasers. Oh my gosh, they are arguably the most annoying. If you're first time playing this, you will get track hawked by this every time. I'm not talking about the orange ones either. I'm talking about the ones where he summons these orbs and they will track hawk you until a certain amount of time. They are so annoying. Let's not to mention that the lasers do a lot of damage to you, and when you get close to them, it gets so annoying to dodge. Once you know the pattern, it actually becomes pretty easy even on DMD. But that can be said about the second fight. This is what the first fight led up to. This is what the whole game led up to. Welcome to the hardest fight in the whole game, and one of the hardest fights in the entire franchise. Now, this could be kind of controversial. Some people say it's one of the best and one of the worst because of how sadistic it can be. In my opinion, this is definitely one of the best fights in DMC1. However, I can completely understand why some people didn't like this fight. Some parts of this fight get effed up quickly. Mundus can now randomly spawn a row of orbs either up top near his head or on the ground where your platform is. Let's just say if you don't use the shotgun for this, you got no shot. He can spawn lava on the platform. He can randomly spawn lasers as well. And as well as sometimes throwing a dragon, which you better pray that he summons that dragon if you're low on health. Because if you don't, you're practically screwed because on DMD, you don't heal at all. So good luck. He can also spawn energy blast, which he throws at you, but if you time it correctly with DT, you can actually throw it back at him and it stuns him for a while, which is very useful. He can also break the platforms where you can stand on and even throw them at you at times, which is annoying. He can even punch you, which is pretty easy to dodge. He can also throw meteors at you, and when he does it, it feels like an eternity because he's just doing like 2 to 3 cycles in a row, it feels like on DMD. Again, this is easily the hardest boss in the game. You only can use Sparda. Holy waters don't work at all, as they don't even touch him for a fraction. And you can't even use anything else at all. Like, you only can use Sparda as your double arm. And I would 100% recommend use the shotgun. Round Trip and Meteor are literally your best friends. You want to use Meteor a lot to try to damage him. And Round Trip is really good when you're taunting, because while it's happening, you gain a lot of DT back. And I have tried the speedrun strat before, but honestly I just can never pull it off, so out of the question. And for his third fight, I don't have a lot to say for doing this, honestly. This is the easiest boss fight. The only time you will ever struggle is your first time ever playing this boss. And that literally can be said for every boss in this game. He just stands there and lets you wail on him with guns, or obviously the easier way is to use Vortex with Alistor. Other than that, this is literally a cakewalk. Now, I definitely do enjoy Moonus a lot more than Griffin. That's why he's a lot higher, since you have to deal with the camera. Although he's a lot harder, but there's a lot more rewarding to win in the end. Definitely a great antagonist within the story of DevilMayCry, and a killer boss theme, and overall great design. Good stuff. Well, it's time. Time to talk about arguably the most controversial boss in this game, and probably the most hated one in this game, Nightmare. Now remember, this is my opinion, so let me explain of why I have him at number 3. Yes, I know, a lot of people complain about the amount of BS Nightmare throws at you. I understand that. I've been there too, trust me, still to this day. But for a PS2 title, this is kind of impressive, seeing how complex this boss is. The orb mechanic is something I believe only Nightmare has done. Now, I haven't played, 4 and 5, so I don't know yet. But this is insane for a PS2 title, and just for how early this game was. See, the problem that a lot of people don't understand with Nightmare is that the amount of damage you deal to him makes the fight a lot harder, which could catch people really off guard. Which, obviously, I'm just saying it because, if you play DMD, you probably know it by now, obviously. But to newer people, this probably catches them really off guard, as the more damage you deal to him, it makes the fight a lot harder. And if you damage him enough, the orb will go from blue to red, and you'll deal a lot less damage. Pretty simple. However, for Nightmare, this will go on for all 3 of his fights. So if you wail him in the beginning, you're gonna just make stuff harder for you. And trust me, you better be using Ifrit, and if you aren't, I don't know. Good luck. Now, as with other bosses, you really don't need to pick up a strategy. Whatever you did before, you could just do it the same over and over to kind of work. For Nightmare, however, it kind of forces you to change everything and to learn about the fight itself and how to react to everything and deal with it. As before, you could have just done mashing and it would have worked for you. It forces you to learn the fight perfectly and how to actually cope, with all the attacks that Nightmare does to you. From lasers, from the orb itself dealing damage to you if you're too close, to the lightning beam that he does that takes literally a fraction of your health off. Because see, with bosses before him, like Phantom, Nero, and Griffin, there are strats to literally just cheese the bosses to make it a lot easier. With Nightmare, you can't really cheese anything. The boss basically forces you to learn all the moves to how to deal with them, and you can't cheese it at all. The best thing I love about Nightmare is the other mechanic is that he'll suck you up and take you to the underworld. What's unique about this is that you literally are forced to fight another boss, which is something I feel like only DMC would do correctly. Which I know could be really annoying for some, which definitely I understand that. However, I definitely would recommend doing it if you need to heal, since again, DMD, there's no healing at all, and I doubt a lot of people like to use items since it's just cheesy. The first fight for Nightmare is pretty cool. It's the same exact arena you'd fight Phantom, the first boss in the game, except in the dark, but there's a lot of glowing effects, which is really cool. The second fight's more the same thing. You obviously have the combo of him using the beams, the lasers, the orbs. It's the same thing as the first one, except now he has a boomerang, which is so annoying. Not only does it deal a lot of damage to you if it hits you, it's so hard to try to hit it. Now, for most people, you'd usually wait for the thing to spawn in, and then you would hit it. But for some reason, most of the time you're doing that, it just ends up hitting you and you take the damage. And the timing for it feels so wonky. Like, at least for the skewer attack Nightmare does, you know, it'd be consistent. With this one, it just feels really off to me. Nothing really to say much about the second fight, except the arena's a lot worse in my opinion, but it's not terrible. But now, of course, it's time to talk about the most hated part of Nightmare. His third fight. Here we go. The most hated fight, and one of the most hated fights in the entire franchise. Now, I have to admit, the lighting, the effects, the arena is beautiful. One of the best arenas, in my opinion. But the boss fight itself is literally a nightmare. Pun intended. This is an easy, like, top 3 hardest boss fights in this game, without a doubt. There's like 2 that contend with this. Remember when I mentioned about his orbs? Well, there's a high chance it's going to turn from blue to red in this fight. If it hasn't turned red yet, it probably will in this fight. It makes this boss so long, and that's one of the problems with it. This boss takes forever, it feels like. And the camera can sometimes really screw you over for this fight specifically. At first, it really isn't even that bad. It's actually kind of fun, you know? It's the same thing as the first 2, except now if you get, you know, consumed by him, you fight Nero Angelo rather than, you know, Griffin for his first fight and Phantom for the second fight. And if you're low, absolutely do this, because it's literally the easiest out of all 3 of his fights. With the moves, Nightmare can now go on the top of the ceiling, and he just stays there for a certain amount of time. He can throw lasers at you, which aren't too bad. However, you still need to be cautious, because Nightmare will then drop down and turn into a net. And if you're in that net, you better get out of there immediately, because then he'll do a splash attack, and it deals a lot of damage to you, and you don't want that. However, after that, it doesn't seem that bad. But then you get to the end. And then it all starts.
Humans, what sweets. You should know better than to trust a stranger. Your presence has become a hindrance to my master's bloody scheme. Now die!
Welp, here it is. Here's the most hated part about this whole fight. Just when you think you finally beat this piece of shit, you get blue-balled. And then this happens.
Hey, yo, what the fuck?
The great mastermind of Hideki Kamiya thought this was a great time, a great idea to give Nightmare fake health. Fake freaking health. Oh nah, they said F you and they give him more attacks because Trish backstabs you and gives him a lightning move that takes a quarter of your health off. He'll also do a multi-directional attack that's almost impossible to dodge, it feels like. Let's not forget about the lasers that track hawk you at the right time to literally kill you. Every single time. I still don't understand to this day why they thought it was a good idea to give this other phase and just make it complete and utter BS. Apparently this wasn't enough. The DT stealing ability, the skewer, the boomerang that takes 90% of your health off. Alright, let me relax a little bit. I don't want to get my blood pressure boiling. Aside from that little rant, I do still have, you know, Nightmare at 3rd place. I think he is a better boss than Moonless and Griffin. Again, it's your opinion. If you don't agree with that, it's fine. But, you know, to me, you know, comparing with the Griffin, you know, more moves, more strategy. With Griffin, it's really just using guns or the Ifrit and grenade gun combo. And, you know, with Moondis, you know, Moondis 1, you have no defensive options. You have, at max, 3 moves. And then there's a second fight, which I do admit is a lot better than all of Griffin's and Nightmare's fights. To me, at least, for the second fight. But even then, you can only use Sparda, which you have the DT, which is very powerful, so it makes up for it. And you only should really be using the shotgun. I don't know why you'd be using the grenade gun at all. That's unless you forgot to get the shotgun in the library in Mission 2, which I'm sure some people did in their first playthrough. And if that's the case, I mean, sure. But again, Ebony and Ivory could probably do a better job. But it's your choice, honestly. The mechanics are pretty cool, too. the ore mechanic that he has, although it can be very annoying. And the underground mechanic to fight all the other bosses is really helpful. And let's not forget the arenas are pretty nice. Well, not the second one, but the first and third one are very nice. And also, you don't need a lot of moves, or you don't need to be so complex to be a good boss. Obviously, some bosses do that pretty dang well in the game, and even in other games. Basically just saying that less is more. And that can definitely be said about the next boss.
Surprise. I hope for your sake you got something inside that big body of yours.
This is how you make a first boss. Going to the silver medal is Phantom. And oh boy, what a fun experience for new players. And I wish I was joking. This boss will hand you your own ass if you don't know what you're doing. Unless you know how to hit the criticals on his sack. But even then, good luck. To me, and many other diehard DevilMayCry fans can agree on, Phantom is one of the greatest first bosses in a video game. To basically how he sets the bar for all the other future bosses to come up. Not only in this game, but in future titles. For being the first boss in this game, he has a pretty decent variety. Well, not as much as Mundus or Nightmare. Still has enough moves to make him enjoyable. In close quarters, he can try to hit you or use a skewer attack. He also has a fireball move, which can be aerial or grounded, and if you swing at it at the right time when it's being thrown, it actually hits him back and it deals a little bit of damage. He can also spawn lava spikes and even jump at times, which can be a little bit tricky. The scariest part about this boss I can say is when you have him at red, he'll start to be a lot faster and he does like double the damage. And, fun fact, if your health bar is at red, he'll actually try to do a special death animation where he'll use his skewer attack and eat you, which is kind of neat. To me, the first fight is amazing and is arguably one of the best boss fights in the first game. The first arena, being the Cathedral, is a really fitting boss fight for Phantom. Although the camera can be a little bit wonky, it's not that bad. His second fight is kind of meh. I mean, it's more of a secret, since I guarantee you most people don't even know that this boss fight even existed. However, this boss fight is actually a requirement. On Mission 5, if your Melancholy Soul is off, you have to recharge it. So you have to go back into this place where you first met Nella Angelo in order to revive it. You can also fight him on Mission 8 before entering the other ledge to fight the actual final fight for Phantom. I will leave a link in the description for my video to show how you can encounter this fight. Honestly, there's nothing much to talk about for this fight, as it's just the same as Phantom 1, except it's in the same arena you would actually meet Shadow for the first time, while also having a different color texture, which is really weird. However, 3 is definitely a ramp up. Well, not as good as 1, it's definitely up there. With also having some bonus points, having that one method you could use to kill Phantom as well, which is fun, but it takes a while. Now he has a multi-meteor attack, which isn't too hard to dodge, but can be definitely tricky in your first playthrough. But now he also brings that red hot juice for the extra flair, which I think is amazing. While it looks a little watered down in the HD collection, it still looks solid. But aside from all this is how you make a first boss. When not as advanced as Nightmare or difficult as Mundus, this boss is still incredible. The soundtrack, the design of the boss, the arenas are all incredible. Although the second one's kind of lackluster, definitely, but it's more of a secret if anything. For being so simple, this boss is fantastic. However, there's one more boss that's better than every other boss and is arguably in a league of its own. Number 1 on the list.
stinking hole was the last place I thought I'd find anyone with some guts.
To describe this boss in one word, perfection. Number 1 on the list, Nello Angelo, the star of this game's roster. No underworld or orb mechanic. No gigantic boss fight or nothing. No space carrier, nothing. Just a human-sized, simple 1v1. That's what's taken the number 1 spot. He has similar moves to Dante, and moves like lightning. Seriously, that stinger will catch you off guard a lot. As well as throwing a projectile. And not to forget, this man will stun lock you to Kingdom Come if you don't dodge correctly. However, his animations are pretty long, so it gives you enough time to punish. And that's what this boss is all about. Timing and punishing. His first fight is absolutely amazing. After damaging him a certain amount of time, he'll teleport to different sections in the arena. This is pretty unique, as no other boss does this in the game, I'm pretty sure, or in the series. Another good thing is that he won't like stun lock you or corner camp you, which is thankful. Because trust me, on DMD, this man will clown you and will have the nerve to taunt at you after doing a combo at you. It gets very annoying. While all the fights are good, the second fight is a little bit weaker, but it's still pretty great. Biggest problem with that fight being the camera, but not to like Griffin or anything, it just happens here and there. Has a couple more moves but nothing crazy, but the arena is definitely stellar and I think it's probably better than the first one. Although some people argue that one of the things that make Nello that great is, you know, the amount of cheese you can do, like slash canceling, and also the Ifrit and grenade combo if you know how to do it. As well as its infinite loop. For this, you just have to slash cancel him 3 to 4 times, back up, and he'll forcefully do his projectile attack. Granted, the timing is a little bit tight, but it's very consistent if you know what you're doing. And all the other bosses have some type of cheese, although not really Nightmare, but to be fair, at least Nier doesn't have as many BS moves as Nightmare does, so it's a plus. However, there's one more boss fight to Manello I didn't talk about yet. And this fight is what you call the peak of DevilMayCry 1.
A man with guts and honor. I like that. But it's a shame you serve Mundus.
This fight right here is what makes Nello Angelo the best boss in DevilMayCry 1. Oh, sorry, not Nello Angelo. I meant to say Vergil. The Vergil. Him. Yes, him.
Foolishness, Dante. Foolishness. I'll just use more of yours to undo Daddy's little spell. I need more power.
But it was pretty obvious from the get-go, to be fair. But enough yapping. It's time to talk about the boss fight itself. This fight is easily in the top 3 best and top 3 hardest for this game. This is where I mentioned before, patience and punishing is key for this fight. On DMD, it only takes 2 moves for him to kill you. If he does his stinger or his fireball attack, it takes 3/4 of your health off. Let's not even talk about the fact that he also summons swords in this fight. He can summon it in 3 ways. He can summon it in a circle, spread it out, or even on his body, and you don't want to touch that. Because for a certain amount of time when he has it on, he'll randomly just shoot it out, so you gotta be cautious about that. This is easily not only the best boss, but the best boss fight in the game. Everything about this boss is perfect. The theme song, Ultraviolet and Super Ultraviolet, are perfect with that spooky church organ, especially for the third fight. The arena for this fight is easily the best, up there with Nightmare 3, and I'd argue it's even better. And trust me, do not get in a corner in this fight. You don't. Despite being a lot harder, it's still more fun with all the damage and how faster he is, and it's just way more rotting in the end. Also, the little detail for the lightning in the third fight and the RBG lights he has within his 2 fights, as well as his third one. He kinda suffers the same problem as Phantom, as in the HD collection it kinda looks watered down, but in the PS2 it looks absolutely beautiful. Overall, Nello Angelo / Vergil is without a doubt the best boss in DevilMayCry 1. Easily a top 3 boss fight for Vergil, as the only 2 that I think that are better is his final fight in DMC 3 and of course DMC 5's. Leagues above the cast in DMC 1, other than like Phantom, but I think he's right there or around there. For even being in the first game, he's easily better than 90% of the boss fights in the entire franchise. And it makes sense. The amount of strategies, the music, the arena designs, and the moveset is what makes this boss absolute. And that's the list. As I mentioned before, every boss in DevilMayCry 1 is fantastic in their own right, and none of them are anyways bad. But there definitely are some that shine a lot better than others. This video definitely took me a while, so if you did enjoy the video, please make sure to like and subscribe for more, as I plan on doing ranking videos for the rest of the game as well. I may even do a video on ranking every individual boss fight itself, and of course doing the other games as well. If you disagree with the list, that's fine. I would love to know your reasoning down in the comments of why you have this boss at a different placement than I did. Well, that's all everyone. Thank you guys so much for all the support throughout the channel and sitting down and watching this video. I really do appreciate that. And as always, have a good one everyone. Peace.